Yo guys, what's up? It's here. No more spamming me with angry messages. Orc tier list, okay? I was working on it. I just needed some more time to work up towards it. And then I needed to get my patch information out because Blizzard is looking at our patch info and, well, we don't know when the next patch is coming. And we want to make sure to give them good information, so I had to get that out. I'm surprised. People have actually been like, yo, you did the other 3 races, where's the Orc? All right, let's go to Orc. I hope I can do it justice. I was an Orc pro player for Warcraft 3 for 7 years, so I have a lot to talk about. This soundtrack runs for an hour. Let's see if we can make it. So, here are the units for Orc. There's a couple of Orc units that are not in this list. For example, there's no Feral Spirit, the summon from the Farseer. There's no Healing Ward, which is a unit that summons from the Witch Doctor. Sentry Ward, Serpent Ward, right? I could have included all those, but for consistency's sake, I'm for the most part not including summons from heroes because they belong to hero tier lists or ability tier lists, right? And this is a unit tier list. And the Witch Doctor's units will be encapsulated within the rating for the Witch Doctor. A wonderful set of icons. Almost everything good that happened in my life is thanks to these units. So even if I put them in tier D, that doesn't mean I hate them. I love every single one of these beautiful bastards. All right, let's begin. Peon, tier S because he's a worker upon which the entire Orc civilization is built. I've been putting all workers in tier S, but some people have been asking, but which one is more S, right? Okay, maybe we do a worker tier list sometime. Just 4 workers or 5 workers or 6 if you count the shredder. But I mean, he's the underpinnings of the Orc Great Hall, right? Peon has to be in tier S. He's the best. However, if I'm being honest, I don't think he's tier S, right? Like, we need him for gold and wood, but he's probably one of the worst workers. He does have 250 health, which is more than most of the workers. No, that's more than all of the workers. He does 1 more damage than the peasant, which is pretty cool. But I don't like his base defense capabilities as much as some others. He can't help creeping generally like a militia or a ghoul might. But anyway, let's not mince words. He's tier S. Let's move on to more interesting units. Yeah. Next up, the Grunt. The Grunt is the classic depiction and symbol for the Orcish race. At 700 health, 825 health after the Brute Strength upgrade, which used to be called Berzerker Strength and only gave 100 health, but now it gives 125 and it's called Brute Strength. Also adding 3 damage to his auto attack. At 50 gold and 150 lumber, the Grunt is a pretty tanky tier 1 unit. In fact, he is the tankiest tier 1 unit. 825 health. He does good damage. It's a 3 population unit and he's tanky. With 800 health, 825, his health total fully encapsulates 2 charges of Healing Salve, which is 400 health over 45 seconds, purchasable from the Voodoo Lounge of the Orcish race, which is better than the Headhunter, who has less than 400 health, so you can never fully utilize the value of a Healing Salve. There's always some money being lost, and you don't want to wait till they're 1 HP either. So the Grunt is a very useful damage absorber. It's easy to save them. They're beginner friendly, right? It's easier to send a hurt Grunt home than to be fast enough, especially as an intermediate or lower level player, to send a Footman or a ghoul home, and in that sense they're forgiving. But they've got some drawbacks as well. At 3 population, with other tier 1 units being 2 population for the most part, except the Huntress, the Grunt does not come out in large numbers. So it is much harder to make surrounds with them. You need 9 population worth of Grunts to have 3 to, together with the blade, do a surround in open space, north, east, south, west, right? Whereas for ghouls, you only need 3 ghouls, which is 6 population, right? So it's not super easy to do surrounds with the Grunts, but I did manage a couple. For example, in the World Cyber Games 2008, 3rd map against Moon on Twisted Meadows near the tavern, we got some Grunt surrounds, and I believe earlier in that series as well, and they're always cool to do Grunt surrounds, because if you do get a surround with them, they're so tanky that it's almost impossible to break out, right? With the damage that's available early game. not much to be said about grunts. They're heavy armor, they're weak against magic damage, kiting, slow, they're weak against air, but they're a solid unit. They are a staple unit for the Orcish race. And unlike footmen, which kind of become obsolete as hero levels get too high, grunts can remain relevant the entire game. They're not uncounterable, they're not OP, they're not super fantastic, but there are definitely reasons to keep making these in a variety of different matchups. They're useful against mountain giants, spellbreakers, raiders. They're good against archers if they can close the distance, which of course you could do with speed scroll. They're good against riflemen entire game long if your opponent is playing a rifleman build. They have a good damage type against medium armor. So I've mentioned all these units that have medium armor where grunts will do bonus damage because of the armor and damage type situation in Warcraft 3. And they will get destroyed by something like Chimera, Druids of the Talon, and you're probably going to stop making them if they have those units. But that's called getting countered. And those units, you don't always go up against them. So I think Grunt should either be tier A or B. It doesn't have a lot of finesse. It can get countered. I'm inclined to just put it at B. Same place where I would put any standard unit. Like, they're not particularly fast. You don't have particularly many, so surrounds are rarer. They don't have any special mechanics. They can't hide like an archer. They can't mine lumber like a ghoul. They can't get almost no damage from piercing like a footman. They are tanky though, so they're very high on B or they're low on A. I'm gonna say tier B. Next up, Headhunter. The Headhunter and the Berzerker are two sides of the same coin. And this is the tier 1 variant that will remain so until tier 2. And once you upgrade your Greathold to a Stronghold and then eventually a Fortress, you can upgrade for 75 gold, 175 lumber, the Headhunter to become Berzerker. It will transform all current Headhunters to the Berzerker form, gaining them 100 extra health and also gaining them the ability to turn on Berserk mode, which gives you 40% more damage taken from all sources, including spell and physical, but you also have more attack speed. I believe it's 50% more attack speed. It's accompanied by a loud troll war cry. Oh, something like that. And that means they're doing a lot of damage. The Headhunter is a 2 population, very cheap unit that can be spammed quite a bit from 1 or 2 barracks generally. And they're a very flexible unit. They're one of the most staple units of the Orcish race. However, it hasn't always been so. The Headhunter only started to become part of the Orcish army mainstay from 2020 onwards. So what is it that happened in 2020? Well, it was shortly off the back of Reforged, and Headhunters had received a number of important buffs. 100 bonus range, 25 bonus health, and also an increase in the troll regeneration effectiveness. You see, that's an upgrade that affects Headhunters, Berzerkers, and Witch Doctors. And Troll Batriders, by the way, which is kind of funny. It gives bonus regeneration to the entire troll race. It's got that troll blood energy that are known across many different fantasy games. And that ability was always kind of okay, but it was given extra oomph in the beginning of Reforged. And you could really start to notice its important effect. Those buffs all together really formed an important bed for the Headhunter to become part of the mainstay of Orcish race. However, it had never been done or possible before because especially their short range had been a major detractor to seeing them into viability. And it was one of my viewers, Save Orcas, who convinced me to try the strategy over and over again, and eventually this would become, even though I was retired as an active pro player, this would become the dominant strategy from 2020 onwards for Orc players to use in all matchups. And not because I conceived of the idea, I, a former World Championship winner, but one of my viewers that doesn't even play the game. He really believed in it and he kept crunching build orders and I kept, trying out his builds and I kept not believing in it. I'm usually relatively skeptical of other people's Warcraft 3 ideas, and I must say with good reason. But this one really worked and I ended up nearly defeating the current best player in the world, Happy, 3-0 score. I was leading 2-0, but I made a mistake in the third game and he ended up actually reverse sweeping me 3-2, but it was all thanks to this strategy. and of course an okay implementation of it as well at the time. And the fact that the strat was new. Then the strategy started catching fire all over the world. People from China and Korea started playing it as well, and it became pretty imba for a while. And eventually Headhunter received some nerfs as well by Blizzard in order to take them down a bit. In their current form, Headhunters are an option, which is an amazing place to be in for the Orcish race. If you start playing Warcraft 3 in 2024, you can either make Grunts or Headhunters or a combination of them from tier onwards. Just make sure you've got the right build order for them, which you can see from any of my videos on my @followgrubby YouTube channel. Headhunters are definitely tier A. They do have some counters. Headhunters are not super happy to go up against high-level heroes with Thunderclap, Mountain King, Blizzard from the Archmage. They do pretty good damage against Spellbreakers, but they also take good damage. They're afraid to turn on their Berserk ability when opponent has area of effect spells available because they take amplified damage from it. But if you're better and if you're good, and I feel like it should be like this at high level, you only activate it on some of them instead of the whole group. But most people just do the whole group at the same time, and that is just asking to be murdered on all of your units at the same time. But if you turn it on a couple, you start spamming the opponents in notifications that the Headhunter upgrade has turned on, and some spears are red, signifying that they are in that mode, some aren't, so it becomes more complicated for them to target the right one. And so that's something you can do. Actually, I should group these separately. Headhunters themselves are most effective against human early game, and until you get to the tier 3 upgrade, they kind of struggle to fight anyone. You cannot really easily open Headhunters against Night Elf without getting punished. Headhunters against Orc is somewhat risky, but it is not uncommon. Headhunters against human is very good, and against undead, Headhunter opening is relatively standard, but you can't really commit to almost any fights after the 3 to 4 minute mark. Let's say after the 4 minute mark, because they'll die too easily to a couple of auto attacks from Death Knight, some Rod of Necromancy skeletons, and some coils to finish them off. And then once Dark Ranger or Lich comes out at 5 minute 30, Headhunters must run and hide until at minute 8 or 9 you finish your Berzerker training upgrade and they get that bonus health. So I'm gonna put Headhunters at tier B for an important staple unit that can be part of your early creeping plan, that has you doing a regular creeping build up, get some levels, get some harass, and then eventually you hide them and you wait till you get the upgrade. Berzerkers, significantly better. Can form part of an army for the entire game. They can focus down enemy air, enemy casters, enemy huntresses, and they're just really, really nice. So Berzerker A, Headhunter B. Next, Demolisher. The final unit that is produced from the Orc barracks. This is it's the sibling that never gets invited as the other siblings go out, right? They're all from the barracks, they're all from the same house, but somehow they always end up planning a date to go somewhere when they knew Demolisher isn't available. And it ends up staying at home, alone, sad, dejected, and unused. D for Demolisher, tier D. The Demolisher is a 4 population unit for 220 gold and 60 lumber. At 4 population, you expect to get a lot out of it, but you don't. It is a mechanical unit with about 400 health. The cool thing about Demolisher is it does receive armor upgrades, just like the Mortar team equivalent at human. The Glaive Thrower and the Meat Wagon do not enjoy armor upgrades, so I know what you're thinking. Demolisher's 3-3 upgrades, pretty badass, right? Hard to kill? Sadly not. They're very slow. They move glacially. They have a 220 movement speed compared to the Raider that's 350, for instance. So they're 50% slower than a Raider. And while Raider is pretty fast, 220 is very slow. Most heroes come out the gate with somewhere around 300 movement speed. So they are about 25% slower than heroes. That means it's exceedingly easy for any hero to start targeting them and taking them down. And unlike biological units, Demolishers cannot be healed by Healing Ward, Heal Salve, or Healing Wave. And so you must resort to mechanical reparations, which is bringing the Peon, who are also slow and vulnerable. So now you've got Peons guarding the catapults. When catapults get attacked, you start trying to repair them, but it's not enough usually to save them. Now you've got a Congo line, a very slow-moving caravan of units. And what are you getting out of it, actually? Well, Demolisher does have 1200 range, just like the other mechanical long-range siege units, which is cool. It does over 100 damage with an additional upgrade, Burning Oil, unlockable at tier 3, which is a cheap 50 gold, 150 lumber upgrade that completes relatively fast. And it actually deals, and this is not easy information to find, but I tested it before, it deals a total of 18 damage. So Burning Oil creates a burning area upon impact of the projectile. The oil does 6, 6, 3, 3 damage, I believe every half second, in an area around the target. So 6, 6, 3, 3, total 18 damage. Another cool thing about mechanical long-range units like this, and the Glaive Thrower and the Meat Wagon, is that when you attack ground on a guard tower, you use the attack ground command, they do damage 100% to the tower, just like they would if you right-click a tower. But they also do splash damage around the guard tower, which also ends up hurting the peasants around it a bit for like 10 or 20 damage. Whereas if you don't attack ground on the tower, it only hits the tower with no splash. And a funny story about that is back in 2005 and even beyond it, usually I've been known to be quite good against tower rushes and at tower rushes compared to most of the other Orc players. And that's because European players are really cheesy, right? Sometimes European players didn't have the same mechanical prowess as the Asian players, the South Korean and the Chinese players. So you're forced to do more strategizing. I'd say that's partially true for me too sometimes. You're doing more strategy thinking. There's also, on average, and I know I might be stereotyping a bit here, but forgive me because I think I see those trends in the game. There's more dogmatic thinking, perhaps because of education style in South Korea or China, and there's more sometimes free thinking in Europe because there's more freedom to develop yourself. Like there's more like independence valued at school and everything. And so people have like more crazy ideas, but are also slightly less disciplined. I know this is super potentially stereotypical, but you hear that a lot. You kind of see it in the education system and you see it in the play style. So generally you've got better execution in South Korea, China. In Europe, got a bit more wild ideas. So it happened once that one of the Asian players said that they noticed that my catapults were more effective than theirs. Like mine was doing more splash damage and they didn't know why. And I guess because I felt a little complimented, I ended up telling them the secret. When actually you should keep those secrets for yourself, right? It's a competition. But I was flattered, it worked. So anyway, that's the secret of Demolisher. But as much as I gas them up, they suck. They die too easily. The projectile is slow moving, so it can be dodged. So even though supposedly you could use catapults to kill sorceresses, dryads, and priests, those can move, and then they won't do nearly as much damage as the main damage promised. So the Demolisher's damage a little bit is a lie, just like Blizzard's reforged promises. And Blizzard would also be in tier D if I made that tier list right now for game developers, whereas I used to put them, of course, in tier S. Next up, Raiders. Raiders are the better siege unit in the Orcish race. They are amazing. Huh? Raiders, I'm not even going to beat around the bush. Raider is the best Orcish unit, I think. Right? I'm going to put him over Peon. And I even think there might be a case to look at how Raiders might be one of the best units in the game. It is very possible that Raiders might be the best unit in the game. Let's look at what they are. They cost 180 gold, and they are 3 population. They have 600 health, maybe 23 to 27 siege damage. Maybe my editor will show the stats as I talk about it so you can see. They have siege damage, which is bonus damage on unarmored and fortified. And so when you look at them, and they can get the pillage upgrade, just like the Peon and the Grunt. And pillage upgrade, we'll talk about that after I finish talking about the Raider, because pillage mechanics are not very well known to a lot of people. But basically, when you look at the face of it, what the Raider is, the name, the damage type, and his speed of 350, and the fact that he has an ensnare, which can stop a worker from repairing, it looks like they are the original objective completers. The only objective in Warcraft 3 that stands above all others is to destroy all enemy buildings. That leads to technical elimination. Though in the multiplayer meta of Warcraft 3 playing, it is very typical for players that lose the hope to win to call GG, good game, and leave the game. This is considered normal sportsmanship. It's only when someone pissed you off by, you know, insulting you or something that you may make a lot of buildings in secret places to hide away and to make it cost as much time as possible for your opponent. But usually people call GG and leave, or just leave, right? And Raider completes the objective of killing buildings, and it looks like that's his role, but he is so much more. You see, the key skill for Raider isn't pillage or the fact that he has siege damage. He does not particularly win fights. His toolkit is so flexible. So Raiders are very fast, 350. But the big one is Ensnare. Ensnare is a 25 gold, 75 lumber upgrade that allows the Raider on a cooldown to throw a net that roots a hero or a unit. This cooldown used to be 12 seconds. Back in 2010 and the years preceding it, Ensnare was on a 12-second cooldown. Guess the duration, 12 seconds. So there is the throwing the Ensnare animation and the traveling projectile, but from the look of it, it looks like one Raider can permanently root one enemy unit in place. It didn't quite work out that way because of the animation and stuff, but let's say if you have 7 units, you could root 6 enemy units forever if you have 7 Raiders, because you can go for like the overlap, and you could almost permanently root 1 unit with 1 Raider. That's crazy. Raider Ensnare gives so much battle control. Think of the things you can do with Ensnare, rooting enemy heroes and units. If the enemy has a high level Demon Hunter with Mana Burn or Immolation, and the Immolation would kill my units, or the Mana Burn would sap my Tauren Chieftain or Shadow Hunter or Farseer of mana, I can Ensnare their Demon Hunter for 3 seconds, queue up a next Raider, ensnare him again, and then take the next Raider and ensnare him again. I've now put him outside of combat for 8+ seconds. I'm not getting mana burned. He lost the full mana burn cooldown. He's not doing his immolation damage. It's fantastic. While the Raider himself is losing the battle to the enemy archers, dryads, and bears, right? He's not going to win that battle. I have made it so the enemy hero isn't fighting. With micro, with control, with movement, with manipulation, with the ensnare route. My heroes are still fighting, so there you have it. So the Raider is helping in that way. Another thing you can do. Enemy unit is about to burrow. The Crypt Fiend is about to evade detection. He's gonna save himself. But I ensnare it, so now it can't burrow. Enemy Huntress is running away with low life. You ensnare it, you end up killing it, rather than the fact that it heals up and goes away. Archmage is using Staff of Teleportation, or better yet, Mass Teleportation ultimate ability. Ensnare is also a channel canceller. You can stop Starfall, Tranquility, Mass Teleport with this. You can stop Staff of Teleportation. There are so many more things you can do with Ensnare. Oh, I need to say one more thing about Raider Ensnare. Maybe we can splice it back to the Raider part. Raider Ensnare was justifiably nerfed. It used to be 12-second duration and 12-second cooldown, but they nerfed it to 10-second duration and 16-second cooldown. A change that I personally find pretty sad, because they're my favorite unit in the game, but it is actually justifiable, and even now Ensnare is still very powerful with the nerfs from a couple of years ago. Raider is the ultimate aid for any high level player, and is still a really good tool for low level players as well. You can just kill buildings and run, kill buildings and run, and get money from pillage. Best unit in the game potentially. And let's talk about pillage. A lot of people ask me, how does pillage work exactly? How much does a pillage Peon get, a Raider and a Grunt? And do you steal it from the enemy's gold reserves? Well, not directly. The enemy made a building and it had a cost. You kill the building and you get money for it. So you're indirectly stealing the money he originally invested. And here's how it works. You get exactly half of the enemy's gold and lumber investment from a building that you fully kill with pillage. So if you kill the enemy altar, which is 180 and 50, you get 90 gold and 25 lumber, but only if all hits are from pillage. And so you're getting half of those resources, and anytime you hit the building, you do a percentage of damage, and that percentage is multiplied with half of the total cost. So if you do 10% of damage, then you get 8 gold. And that's how that works. Next up, Kodo Beast from the Bestiary. Kodo Beast is a 4 population unit that has a lot of purposes. He's got 1000 health, 1 armor. He has an unarmored status, which means he takes bonus damage from piercing. So he gets focused down pretty well by Berzerkers or Archers or Fiends. He has a drums upgrade, aura, which on the baseline, as he comes out of the Bestiary, he gives 10% bonus physical damage to all units, ground and flying and heroes, but not to Serpent Wards. But to normal summonables, yes, Feral Spirits. So 10% bonus damage to all, which is the equivalent of an attack upgrade. So having 1 Kodo in your army, in any army that's greater size than 40 population on your total population sheet, can be very, very useful. He also has a second ability, Devour. Devour basically makes a Kodo eat a unit entirely. This works on almost every unit in the game, except creeps of level 6 or higher. It doesn't work on Spirit Walkers because of resistance skin. It doesn't work on air units, even if you ensnared them to bring them down to the ground, which is another thing I didn't talk about for ensnare. You can bring air units to the ground to attack them with melee only. So Kodo cannot eat resistant units, such as Walker and Mountain Giant with upgrade, but they can eat unupgraded Mountain Giants. They can eat magic immune units, like Spellbreaker, and Ensnare works on those too, by the way. They can eat magic unit like Dryad. They can eat small summonables like Water Elemental, Feral Spirit, Skeletons, but they can't eat the big ones like Doomguard and Infernal. This question actually came up on my stream. Can Kodo Beasts eat a Great Hall? The answer is no. I had 2 other questions. Can Kodo Beast eat the country of Poland? The answer is no. This came up a lot. And can Kodo Beasts eat other Kodo Beasts? This answer is also no. And I think I covered most of the other important case scenarios, but if you have any other questions about what Kodo Beast can eat, make sure to ask me in the YouTube comment section and I'll try to answer it, maybe even test it out to the best of my abilities and let you know. When a Kodo Beast eats a unit, it starts slowly DPSing that unit inside his belly. The enemy has vision of your Kodo Beast that is currently devouring one of their units. But strangely enough, they cannot know which unit is inside the Kodo. So they need to remember. Luckily, I have very good memory and I always remember everything in games, including in Elden Ring and especially in Warcraft 3. But let's say if you don't know if you lost a bear or a dryad, you can see that there's something of mine in your Kodo Beast, but you don't know what it is. And additionally, there is a damage per second component to the way that Kodo Beasts devour a unit inside their belly. And eventually, when the unit dies, that's when there is a digestive sound. The Kodo Beast finishes eating. That's when you get experience for the kill. That's also when the opponent loses the population attribution that unit has. And that's when they lose the vision of that Kodo Beast as well. So that's a pretty interesting amalgamation of different features to how Devour works. If they kill the Kodo before the unit is fully digested, it will come out hurt, scared, probably a little traumatized, probably a little smelly, but alive and can then be saved. If you devour a creep that has an item and then you lose the Kodo before the creep is fully digested, the item is still there, the creep is still there, and the person that kills the creep will still get the experience and gold. There used to be a funny thing you could do with the invincible Watcher wards that I talked about in my map tier list video that I just uploaded. You could Kodo Beast devour the Ogre Mage, bring your Kodo elsewhere on the map, kill your own Kodo Beast, and then plant the Watcher ward down as you kill the Ogre Mage there, to places that the Ogre Mage would normally never be able to go. So you could make your Kodo Beast die in the enemy base and get an invincible permanent reveal of their base on a map like Turtle Rock or Melting Valley before in the tournament map pool, which is pretty funny. Kodo is a staple unit at the very minimum. He's not weak, he's not useless, he's staple. Can you mass Kodos only and win the game? Usually tier S, except for the worker, is might only make this unit and win. That's true for Dryads, that's true for Spellbreakers, it's true for Druids of the Claw, you can make only those and win. It's not true for Kodo Beast, so they're not tier S. It could be an A or a B. Kodo is a great support unit, but does not stand well by himself. He also falls off in defensive scaling because he does not receive either armor or attack upgrades. He has a 16 to 20 piercing attack by himself, which is another element I didn't talk about, which means he's actually not a bad attacker against something like a Dragonhawk Rider. Having 1 or 2 Kodos together with the Headhunters and Raiders is a pretty okay army to have against a small flock of Dragonhawk Riders and even Griffin Riders. They're tanky, and unarmored does not take bonus damage from magic damage of the Griffins. So they're not bad against something like a Griffin Dragonhawk army, Rider army. But it can't be more than like 8 units in the air. Then it becomes too much and you'll need other answers like lots of Berzerkers or Batriders. I'm gonna call them tier A. I cannot make a case for them to be tier B. They have so many applications. They're pretty much in every matchup. They're always good. They buff your heroes. Just like Ensnare buffs your heroes via rooting enemy heroes or units, Kodos buff in pretty much every other way. They're a lightning rod of focus fire. They draw attention, which frees up attention from other units. At 255 gold and 4 population and a relatively slow movement speed, they are not the most agile, but it gets better if you have TC with Endurance Aura. Kodos are really solid, and you're never wrong to make 1 or 2 per game. Next up, Wind Riders. Wind Riders suck. I don't know how to say it. When you comprise their stats, their cast of 265 gold, the fact that they're 4 pop and give 85 experience, they're low 40 damage of piercing damage, they're low 50, 575 health. Wind Riders are a bag of bones, a fragile, fast-moving, high damage unit that is supposed to be able to bring death from above, but really he is a delivery, an Amazon delivery of experience tome to your opponent. They die very easily. They get ensnared, they get Batrider, they get fiend webbed, they get focused fired, they get looked at for like 1 second. The weather is a bit tumultuous. They die, right? Wind Riders are not good. You never see them in Orc Mirror. If you make them against Night Elf, you lose. If you make them against Human, you lose because of rifles, water elementals, and flying machines and Dragonhawks. But you sometimes see them against Undead. Wind Riders are, in my heart, a tier D unit. But occasionally you can use them against Undead. I think they're really very awful. It's either C or D. Usually making Wind Riders just loses you the game. It's a weak unit. But because you can make them at tier 2, there is a risk that if they were stronger, that you could quickly overwhelm and destroy an opponent with them if they don't have enough anti-air. But Wind Riders, they lose to 1 single Demon Hunter with Orb of Venom. They lose to a couple of archers. They lose to so many things. Maybe sometimes you see them against Undead, but it's more of a desperation strategy these days that doesn't really work very well. I think they're better at middle and lower level though. This is a tier list for high level. Just at middle and lower level, I think you can get away with a couple of Wind Rider wins. That's not what this tier list is. Are Wind Riders better than Demolisher though? They're a little better. Let's see what else comes to tier C and then I'll put them appropriately. But I have vowed, and not for the first time, and hope probably not for the last, never to make this unit again because they're so weak. I'll put them in D until I change my mind. I'm still angry with them. The Batrider. Batrider is a, by design, base killing rat unit. They have a small siege damage that is anti-ground. They cannot attack air units except with a ability that ends their own life, which is called Unstable Concoction. The ends truly do justify the means. Means, not memes. Nothing justifies memes. They do a splash damage that does a lot of single target damage and a bit of splash damage against air when they suicide on an enemy air unit. This makes them exceptionally good at killing enemy units that are in small flocks that cluster together closely. Grouped up gargoyles, grouped up hippogriffs. You can even use a couple of Batriders to kill an unupgraded griffin. But once Griffins get a lot of armor upgrades, Unstable Concoction deals much less damage. Unstable Concoction is actually a unique mechanism inside Warcraft 3. Here's how it works. If you Unstable Concoction use the ability on an enemy air unit, at a certain range, about 300-400 range, the Batrider becomes not a real unit anymore. They go into their accelerated mode where they are destined to collide with the unit. It's not unpreventable for an opponent. I can tell you a couple of ways that you can deal with it. But basically the Batrider goes into an untargetable mode where he can no longer receive physical damage, can no longer be controlled, and can no longer be pulled back. Once the acceleration begins, the explosion will happen. Except, if the opponent's Staffs of Preservation or Staff of Sanctuary is their unit, the Batrider reaches the point where he would have collided and exploded, and then goes back to become a Batrider as he was. The game state of what he was, his health count and so on, is remembered. And then he reappears on that location once he does not make the connection. Banish on the receiving unit by the Blood Mage can also make that unit untargetable by the physical damage of the Unstable Concoction, and the same thing will happen. The Batrider reappears and does not explode. Unstable Concoction is also unique in a sense that it deals physical damage which can be mitigated with all types of armor, including armor upgrades, natural armor, Scroll of Protection, Paladin's Devotion aura, and anything else that I might have forgotten. Inner Fire from the Priest level 3 upgrade. All of these will mitigate the total maximum damage that the Batrider can do, which you can see here on this pop-up that my editor probably showed. And then you have the second part of Unstable Concoction is that despite being clearly a physical spell that gets mitigated by armor, they also get blocked by Anti-Magic Shell from the Banshee. So if the Banshee Anti-Magic Shells a Frostworm or a Obsidian Statue that turns into a Magic Immune Destroyer, and there's AMS on them, Anti-Magic Shell, that amount of damage that Magic Shell protects, which I think is 300, will be completely deducted from the Unstable Concoction damage. So a combination of armor upgrades and Anti-Magic Shell can make it so uneconomical to use a 160 gold Batrider explosion on a Frostworm or otherwise. The Batrider it also enjoys the upgrade of Troll Regeneration, which can make them good at hit and run. But with their small, I believe, 325 attack range, they're pretty close range and they don't beat any unit on the ground. Batriders do not win any battles. They're mostly in order to attack buildings. Mass Batriders is particularly popular in 4-on-4. In 1-on-1, Mass Bats with the design to do base killing only worked for me back in 2004. The last time Mass Bats worked for me in a competitive game was 2004. Though I have seen some Batrider style play in the last 4 years by other Orc players, usually a maximum of 2 bats with Liquid Fire. So what's Liquid Fire? It's a special upgrade that gets added only to the Batrider, and it used to do a 100% repair stop, aka opponents could not repair the building that's being attacked for a few seconds. That's what the Liquid Fire did. And also, that building had an attack speed of 20% of its original attack speed. So you would go into the Watchtower or the Ancient Protector or the Black Citadel and you would attack it with bats, and the opponent can't repair it anymore. And nowadays, a nerf fixed it a bit because it feels frustrating and unfair to lose your castle as a human without the ability to repair at all, provided enough critical mass of Batriders start attacking it, and you couldn't repair. That was a little frustrating, so now repair rate is greatly reduced rather than not possible at all. Batriders typically don't really get used much against buildings anymore in the current high-level meta, but it is one of the most popular newbie strategies because it's relatively easy to execute, to just make one blade, make 5 towers in your base, and then spam Batriders. At the low level, where a sense of timing, efficiency, and build orders typically aren't alive that much, and everyone is just kind of doing something random, as far as I'm concerned, for them it's life and death, right? Mass Bats can be an effective and fun way to play, only for the Orc player. It's not very fun for the opponent usually. But sometimes that makes it more fun for the Batrider user, that the opponent isn't having fun. Because after all, if you're having max fun, what's the best next thing you can get? Your opponent to have a terrible time, right? So yeah, that's the Batrider in a nutshell. How good are they? Well, they're an important counter unit. Their base attacking ability does not really feature much. They cannot win any battles against ground, and they have decent effectiveness as an anti-air unit against a variety of different units. Use them against destroyers, gargoyles, and griffins and dragonhawk riders to a degree, and against wind riders if your orc opponent is foolish enough to make them. They're nice against flying machines, but in one-on-one, the only reason your opponent has flying machines is because you made wind riders. And if you made wind riders, you're gonna lose. So even though you're countering flyings with bats, and bats are amazing against flyings, you're still gonna lose because you're trying to protect your wind riders, and that's not gonna work. Those are gonna die. So there's no reason to ever have bats against human. Again, bats protect wind riders from hippogriffs against night elf, but if you made wind riders, you're gonna lose the game. So then the counter unit of bat doesn't make much sense either. The only situation where you're usually legitimately make them is against undead or against human, and they are an important counter unit in those two matchups. You should definitely consider making them if your opponent is getting some or a lot of air, and as such I place them in C. They're not great, they're not very good, they're not staple, but they're a good counter unit and they're not useless. So first tier C unit. Next up, Shaman. The Orcish Shaman is made from the Spirit Lodge. The Golden Child Shaman has many purposes. He is a key unit against human. Shaman is a key unit against night elf, and he is even a key unit against orc itself for various different strategy permutations. Only against undead do we not usually see the Spirit Lodge or Shamans. So being a key unit in 3 matchups, he is a counter unit, but he is so counter that you pretty much need him every game. And that means he's not tier C. He's good. Let's talk about his abilities. The Shaman has 3 abilities: Purge, Lightning Shield, and Bloodlust. Bloodlust is the tier 3 upgrade from Master Training, and it is a 40 or 35 mana spell that gives movement and attack speed to affected units. The cool thing is, you can auto-cast this, and the Shaman will have some internal logic about who receives the buff first. I do not fully know that internal logic, but it does eventually Bloodlust himself after buffing heroes and other units, and you don't want that generally. So technically, Bloodlust is a noob trap. It is better to manually cast if you're better. However, and pretty much no one has ever been good enough to only manually cast it once you get to larger army size. There's just too many other things to do in battle. So it's nice that autocast exists. You can activate it by clicking right click instead of left click on the icon of Bloodlust. And once Bloodlust is researched, it is on by default, which is a nice beginner friendly implementation of 2002 Blizzard that they put in the game back then. So if you don't want autocast, you have to manually turn it off with a right click. Bloodlust is a very powerful ability, especially in Reign of Chaos, the original instance of Warcraft 3, but it was weaker in Frozen Throne because of all the counter units that were added. The Spellbreaker can cheaply use Spell Steal ability to take Bloodlust and put it on the human army themselves, and although Bloodlust is cheap, so is Spell Steal, and human has Brilliance Aura, and Orc does not. And the Shaman has a magic attack damage that cannot even hit Spellbreakers. So Spellbreakers, which are a staple unit against Orc, counter Bloodlust so bad that it's not even funny. And therefore you never actually upgrade to Bloodlust because there's simply no point. Even the bonus health regen, and mana regen is not enough reason for you to research Master Training as an Orc player against human. Even if you don't use Bloodlust, you get those bonus stats, but that's not enough reason to go for tier 3 and get the upgrade. So no Bloodlust against human. Bloodlust against Night Elf is extremely powerful. However, it can feel very punishing to go up against Moss Wisp that detonate all the Bloodlust away and the mana from the Shamans at the same time. Wisps already get used a lot at high level to detonate Shaman mana pools in standard meta, and Bloodlust would just be more mana removed from the Shamans with very little benefit. So again, no Bloodlust there. In Orc Mirror, Shamans are actually the most common to go to Bloodlust, because Orc doesn't have as punitive anti-magic as all the other races. So that's where we see Bloodlust the most, and it is damn good when you get to it. And I go for it a lot in Orc Mirror. In Orc versus Undead, Bloodlust is also extremely powerful in every regard. The movement speed, the attack speed. However, after the 9 or 10 minute mark, Undeads have access to Destroyers that are a flying unit that devour magic in an area, removing all the Bloodlust, and then get health and mana from that, which makes them deal more damage to you. Shamans are magic damage in their lightning shield and in their auto attack, which cannot hit Destroyers, so Destroyers hard counter them. I've always dreamt of an implementation of a strategy where Bloodlust was allowed to live so that Shamans may fly. The only way to make that happen is if you can kill the Destroyers fast enough, which generally Batriders could do. You could also try to Raider and Snare the Destroyers and then focus them down with Berzerkers. Or you could use Blade Master with Lightning Orb to try and quickly take down the Destroyers. But all of it usually isn't fast and effective enough to actually justify bloodlusting your whole army. Even if you somehow kill the Destroyers on time, when there's multiple, which there should be when you go for Bloodlust, they could morph new statues into Destroyers, steal the buff, and meanwhile, you've invested a lot into something that isn't doing anything yet. So, Bloodlust only gets used in Orc Mirror. Let's talk about the second ability, Lightning Shield. This is a double-edged sword. You cast it on an enemy or on an allied unit, and all units around it receive 20 DPS in a relatively small radius, but not a tiny radius. Put this on a Grunt and move him inside archers to do area of effect splash damage. Or put it on the Tauren chieftain and then do a war stomp in the middle of a human army in order to do a stun and damage from the war stomp and additional follow-up damage from the lightning shield. Bonus points if you use invisibility potion on the Tauren chieftain. Put lightning shield on the Tauren chieftain, which lasts 20 seconds. You go inside the human army without them even knowing it, and then you war stomp for a massive, impactful epicenter of damage and mayhem in the human army. Lightning Shield is a cool creative ability that can be counterplayed via Dispel, dodging, splitting. But it is also strong when combined with War Stomp and Snare and Speed Scroll. It's a very fun ability, one of the coolest designs in the game, and it is powerful and it's instrumental for the Shaman's effectiveness. But by far his best ability is Purge. It is a 65 mana spell that does a 100% movement route on non-resistant units, which is most of the units in the game, and it does a less of a slow, which has a decaying effect on heroes and resistant units. Basically, it starts almost as a root or a great slow and then slowly diminishes to have less and less of a slow effect. So it's kind of a cool dynamic slow effect that can help you to hunt down units. It temporarily immobilizes a unit like an archer or a huntress, and then they can only slowly start to walk away. So it's not as strong as a lockdown ability as in Snare, and it also costs mana instead of just being cooldown based. But it is overall a very strong additional usage of the ability. But by far the most important part of it is the fact that it dispels. A single target dispel that procs practically instantly. Use Shamans to quickly remove water elementals, Force of Nature from Treants, Entangle, Hex from enemy Shadowhunter, Feral Spirits from the enemy Farseer, and so much more. It is a strong ability with many different use cases. Shaman is neither tanky nor high damage by themselves, but they offer a lot of important support, and you see many orc armies include somewhere between 2 to 6 of these in order to help them in battle, with the average probably being about 3 or 4. Shamans are great. I think they are a very solid staple unit. They never win games by themselves. You can't mass them. They're not just a counter unit. They're not top tier that can deal with everything. And there's definitely a case as making too many. Sometimes you cannot even justify any of them or a lot. But they're a great staple unit, tier B. Also from the Spirit Lodge is the Witch Doctor. Witch Doctor has some of the most OP abilities that never see the light of day in Orc one-on-one games. While the Witch Doctor is an almost must-make unit, tier S, in 4-on-4 and a must-make unit tier S in FFA. In 1-on-1, Witch Doctor is tier C at best. Though there might be some changes coming that might see him to be a little bit better. And it is strange. I must admit it's a bit of a mystery, a bit of a conundrum how this could be the case. Witch Doctor does something like 11 magic damage, which is a little bit more than the Shaman, who does, I think, like 9 or something. So they are pretty decent at killing grunts and footmen. They do decent damage against Druids of the Claw. Looks like we have diminished and finished our 1 hour playlist. So let's restart. That means I've been yapping for an hour. Nice. Good reminder. Witch Doctor. The damage is okay. Their health is nothing incredible. They have pretty good range, just like the Shaman. But let's talk about their abilities. Witch Doctor's first ability is insane. At just 50 mana, you can make a invisible, true sight seeing, large area revealing sentry ward that lasts not 1 minute, which would be really strong. 1 minute reveal in an area when you're not there. It's not 4 minutes. It's not even 8 minutes. It's 10 minutes. 10 minutes of vision in an area. That is insane. So why aren't we making more of these? You would think that in an RTS that's built around imperfect information, element of surprise, that something like this would offer just an uncomparable level of map control and information and awareness. The main issue is, and you only need one of them to spread sentry wards slowly around the map. Just keep it alive, slowly go onto the map, place down a sentry in key areas, rinse and repeat. I have tried to make Witch Doctors work as a staple unit in the first 10 minutes of any game, and I have never succeeded, nor has anyone else. The only time that Witch Doctors ever were used before the 10-minute mark was on Melting Valley and Tauren stand against Human in 2009. Only then, and only under those circumstances, when people would go Mountain King first, fast expand, go mass Griffins, and you would go for a quick Witch Doctor to see where they are. And the only reason it was possible was because Mountain King doesn't have anything you can dispel with Shamans, number one. Number two, humans didn't make any army except Footmen, which they do pretty good against, right? They do well against that. 3, humans did not go Sorceress, Breaker, or Priest, all of which dominate the Witch Doctor. And 4, they would go for a lot of money saved up, a lot of towers, and they fully relied on ninjaing a couple of creeps with their Footmen, their Mercs, their MK, and their Paladin. And then eventually they would make a lot of air units, which again Witch Doctors aren't good against, but simply the information war that you were leading against the human justified the making of a Witch Doctor. Witch Doctor Sentry Ward is very good, and you would think you could make it every game. The reason you can't is because every race and every player pressures each other. There is a battle for creeps, there's a battle for power, there are skill checks, there are unit checks, army size checks, there are dispel checks. If the opponent has Hex, Entangle, Treants, etc., and you don't have Dispel from the Shaman, well, you're gonna die. You're gonna lose. You're gonna lose units that you needn't have. You're gonna fall behind. You're gonna lose out on creeps, etc. They have a second ability, Stasis Ward. It's a 100 mana spell that becomes invisible after 6 seconds and forms a trap that if an enemy walks too near, it stuns all units for 6 seconds and all heroes that get caught by it for 2.5 seconds. That is insane. A 6-second stun, 2.5 on heroes, can affect an entire army. You can plant the Stasis Ward mid-battle, and if an opponent doesn't kill it during the few seconds it's visible and doesn't dispel the area where they know it is, even though it turned invisible, if they don't do any of that, right, and it stuns, that's just game-winningly strong. However, people do those things. They do dispel it. They do find it. They do know that if you're massing Witch Doctors, you're gonna have stasis, so they'll bring a flying machine, or a bottom scout owl, or they'll bring Dust of Appearance, and so on and so forth. Or the Orc player dies because they're for some reason massing Witch Doctors and trying to get Stasis Ward. Doesn't work. The third ability is also broken. This is the weird thing, because everything Witch Doctor does is broken in some way, but it requires low-level players to work. You know, the people in MOBAs, like a Dota player that runs into 7 consecutive mines of techies and is like, I don't know what's happening, this seems fine, and then they blow up. Against those players, Witch Doctors are good. Heal Ward is insane. It's their third ability. It gives percentage healing in an area for many seconds, like 20 seconds. It fully heals an entire Orc army. All heroes, all Kodos, all Taurens, air units, everything except Demolishers, which are not part of the Orc army. Bye. It's so good. But you can't get to them. If you can't justify a Sentry Ward Witch Doctor, you definitely can't justify going to Stasis or Heal Ward. However, if anything changes in the balance patch notes, if Blizzard changes anything, or if Orc gets more space to go for them, they can be good. And like I said, they're top tier in 4-4 and FFA because there is more space. Maps are bigger, allies cover for you, etc. So I see Witch Doctor the same way that I see Blood Mage. It's the most broken unit that doesn't see play because of alternatives and timings. And it's sometimes a bit hard to understand for if you're not as like experienced in a game. You look at it, on the face of it, it's crazy, but it's not. Tier C. Next up, Spirit Walker from the Tauren Totem. Has been a staple unit in many matchups since Frozen Throne came out. He's a Frozen Throne edition, just like the Batrider. And the Spirit Walker has a couple of cool spells. Spirit Link, that does a spread of damage for all units affected by Spirit Link. I'm gonna explain some deeper mechanics about it, but basically it connects units and spreads damage received. Which is pretty valuable because heal scrolls have an infinite amount of targets it can heal, which means the counterplay to heal scrolls is focusing down one unit and killing no one else, just one unit, and then you kill the next unit, and then you kill the next unit. This is also the way to lower enemy DPS, damage per second, by killing one by one unit. It's a way to gain experience fast in a fight, to level up your heroes, rather than doing a bit of damage against everybody. If you have the chance to focus fire, it's almost always the right play. Spirit Walker runs counter to that. By spreading damage, he makes sure that the entire Orc army, to a degree, is dying at the same time, which makes Healing Ward more valuable, Heal Scroll, and Healing Wave, and also makes it easier to save units from focus fire, which means that the DPS for the Orcish army continues to stay online, as units are all getting hurt, but not dying. Very powerful ability. I am here from the future to explain how Spirit Link works, because I think it is important, vital information that could change your life. A Spirit Walker will cast a Spirit Link on a unit, and it will then bounce to 3 nearby units. All of those 4 units will be connected with Spirit Link. Spirit Link is a global status. If you've got walkers here and you've got walkers here and you Spirit Link them separately from one another, they will be linked spiritually across the entire map. So I could have a walker at home to Spirit Link my worker peons, and I could have a walker in the battle that links those units, and they will all be connected. Now, how does that connection work exactly? How does the damage spread and mitigation work? Well, there's no actual mitigation, there's only spread. But because every unit has their own health regeneration, spreading across many different units essentially multiplies the resource of health regeneration. And here's how it works. If 100 damage goes to a Spirit Linked unit, the Spirit Linked unit receives 50% of that damage, aka 50, and the other 50 gets spread evenly among all existing Spirit Link units. So if I have 4 linked units, 50%, and then they all get 12.5%. So 62.5%, 12.5, 12.5, 12.5. If the index finger gets attacked, 62.5, 12.5, 12.5, 12.5. So that's how Spirit Link works. The more units you have, the less damage the main target receives. If you have an infinite number of units linked, the main target will receive 50% point X decimal, and everyone else will receive a percentage of that. So the more units are linked, the more damage you prevent on the main target, though all damage is still being dealt to the entire army. Be careful to Spirit Link illusions. If you Spirit Link mirror image or illusions of units, keep in mind that illusions take bonus damage in Warcraft 3. Illusions can also be dispelled, which is like instant magical damage to an illusion. All of that damage will also get amplified across the spirit link targets. So if I think I'm being clever, I make 3 Kodos from a Wand of Illusion and I link them because I think, hey, that's 3000 bonus HP that's now linked. Then keep in mind that if those get dispelled or attacked, they will take massive damage. And now my Blade Master is dying because the Kodo is taking damage. Alright, that was my Spirit Link story. Now let's go back to the farewell at the end of the video that I was doing. They also have Disenchant, which has a larger area of effect Dispel than Priest Dispel, and then Devour Magic from Destroyer. It also costs more mana at 100, and it does not come out immediately with the unit like Destroyer or Shaman, but it's requiring an upgrade. Which means if you need Dispel fast as an Orc, like against Entangle, you pretty much go Shaman. But if you think you are able to wait for Dispel, you don't need it immediately, you go for the Totem and make a Walker, which comes out slower than a Shaman. Then you make Disenchant upgrade, Adept Training, which Shaman doesn't need. Then you have 2 Dispels on Spirit Walker. The casting animation is a little slower than Purge, so it's not as instant as Purge, and the casting range seems slightly shorter. But you can dispel many things at the same time. 5 slows, 5 fairy fires, 5 treants, 3 water elementals, 6 skeletons. So the area of effect is valuable. And you can still use it on single target if it's important enough. The Spirit Walker is also a unique unit in that it has a maximum mana pool of 600, which if I'm not mistaken is more than any unit in the game. At 3 population, he's also tankier and he deals more damage. He actually deals significant damage with over 20 magic damage per attack, which makes him very strong against Taurens, Abominations, Grunts, Ghouls, Demolishers if you get on top of them, and so on. Is casting really slower than Purge? Yeah. Shaman is like psh, and Disenchant is like so it's a little slower. He's got like the whole raise the arms animation and then comes down, so it doesn't listen as fast. Usually when we were fighting against Druids of the Talon, I could feel the future that I'm about to be cycloned, and I would actually start my Disenchant before the spell even gets cast. And it is so satisfying when your Blade Master is focusing enemy demon and you know they're gonna cyclone, so you Disenchant when there's no debuffs at all yet, and then the Disenchant hits at the exact same frame that your blade goes in the air. He comes down again, he attacks, he crits the demon, demon dies, and it's great. It's just I have to wipe away a tear. I just saw another demon hunter die in my mind. It's so awesome. So the Walker has good damage, is tanky, lots of mana, has Dispel, has Spirit Link damage spreading, and then Ancestral Healing. Ancestral Healing is their Master Training upgrade. It costs 250 mana, and it brings back to life, with full life, one of these guys. Either himself, well, not himself, one of his friends, or a Tauren, which has 1300 health. After the Tauren, a 5 population unit dies. With the great effort that that requires, Walker can just use Ancestral Healing and heal him. It is on cooldown, though he has mana to cast it twice from his maximum mana pool. It does go on cooldown and cannot be used again. But keep in mind that corpses in Warcraft 3 last 88 seconds. That means you could lose a Tauren now, start a Walker, finish the Walker, walk to the location where the Tauren died, wait till you have another 30 mana to cast Ancestral Healing, which will take a while because you come out with 200 plus and you need 250, and then still save him and say, welcome back, brother. Which is awesome. Like if you lose the Tauren in your own base, you can actually make a Walker and save it. So that sounds pretty good. The only problem with Walker is when used to save Taurens is, well, we'll talk about that later, but are they really worth saving? Are Taurens really worth saving though? So saving themselves is also kind of meh in a sense, because usually they are not the most important unit that you have when you're playing the game. But let's talk about how Walkers get used, right? Walkers are a staple unit alongside Raider, Berzerker, Kodo, Peon, and Grunts. You typically don't see Walker combinations with Demolishers, Wind Riders, Bats, Doctors. That's because you don't see these units in general. When you add good to bad, just like when you add blue to red, you get purple, and purple sucks, right? So just keep it good. Combine it with good units, makes good army. Combine it with bad units, makes bad. That's why the Walker, just like the Shaman, is a staple unit. You cannot mass them, you cannot go for them and win the game. They do require a certain situation to be played, aka enemy has a lot of Druids of the Talon, enemy has a lot of Sorceresses, enemy has a lot of Necromancers. Walkers are your go-to. Enemy has a lot of Druids of the Claw, and with bears doing Roar and Rejuvenate, Spirit Walkers, right? If the enemy has Force of Nature, Water Elementals, right? Spirit Walker. But you don't make them de facto. And so I can't put them at tier A. With their magic damage, they cannot attack enemy magic immune air. They typically don't win anyway against enemy air units of pretty much any kind. They don't beat Gargoyles, they don't beat Hippogriff Riders. They have a shorter attack range than the Shaman, which means they're typically slightly easier to focus fire down. But they do have one very special ability, which is called Corporeal Form and Ethereal Form. Corporeal is the same as anybody else's, bodily form. But Ethereal basically does a self-banish on them. They can no longer be attacked by physical attacks, nor can they do physical attacks. They become more susceptible to enemy magical damage, which means they become a target to Immolation, Mana Burn, Coil, Nova, Stormbolt, Clap, Blizzard, Flame Strike, Impale, Lightning Shield, Chain Lightning, Shockwave, War Stomp, Carrion Swarm, Locust Swarm, Volcano. They become very vulnerable to all of that, but they cannot be physically attacked. However, they also receive more healing from Healing Wave, which is interesting. So if you want to do an efficient heal wave and you can momentarily afford the cooldown where they spend time in ethereal form, you can Healing Wave them after etherealing them, which saves you some money and health. So this can be a nice way to save them from archers or dryads to just turn to ghost form. But they can't attack in that form. Pretty useful though, to save them, and definitely a key ability to use. Let's see if there's anything else about them. Oh yeah, and Spirit Walkers come out of the gate with resistant skin, which means they cannot be devoured by a Kodo, they cannot be possessed by a Banshee, and they get stunned less long than a normal unit. Pretty cool. Absolute staple unit. Finally, the Tauren. The Tauren is the ultimate tier 3.5 unit. Originally made from the totem by himself, without the walkers who came from the lodge. The Tauren is a tier 3 unit that used to require the totem to be started after you get to tier 3. The totem made nothing else than a Tauren, which means it was telegraphed what you were going for. And that's why I call it tier 3.5, just like the Frostworm and the Chimera. So they're a late stage addition. And the question is there still any need of them? I'd say about as much need as we have nowadays of a fax machine. You can still transmit information with it, but it's usually not the most efficient. It's noisy, it's outdated. There's better ways, honestly. It's meh. The Tauren is the fax machine of the Orcish army. It is essentially an upgrade from the Pager, which is what the Grunt is, but the Grunt is always available. Comes out at tier 1. He's tier 3.5. Everything that counters the Grunt, which is what you started with, also counters the Tauren. Slow, kiting, magic attacks, enemy air, right? And usually when you get to the Tauren, the opponent has the ability to have access to any unit in the game. You've saved money for the Tauren, you then need to make a Tauren, you then get a Tauren, he's slow, short attack range, he doesn't have a lot of damage, you need to upgrade Pulverize, you need support via Heal Ward, Bloodlust, or Ancestral Healing for him really to be good. You need other units to counter units that Tauren does not beat. So for the Tauren to come into the field, you typically need a 70 populations situation, and you are then stealing from your own momentum, where you could just make Grunts instead, by doing this entire build-up towards the Tauren. Keep in mind, we're talking about 1-on-1, not FFA or 4-on-4. You're stealing momentum out of your own situation, which means the only situation where Tauren can win is one that you could have won without them anyway. and that makes them tier D. I recently had my heart broken. I saw a text message between Neo from Back to Warcraft. He texted with Lynn, which makes me a little jealous anyway. And Lynn said, please delete Tauren from the game. XD. The XD, the light-hearted notes of that smiley could not hide the despair in my heart, because although I knew Taurens were useless, I was hoping he was cooking something up. Taurens have always been a disappointment. Although, is that true? We've seen some Tauren use in the last 5 years. People try. They've received a bunch of buffs. And I'll go into their exact details of what they are and what they do and how much they cost, etc. I did win a couple of tournaments with Taurens. Back in 2005, when the game was young, and when I was young, and everybody was young, and Warcraft 3 was new, and the possibilities were infinite, coming up with a surprise strategy that your opponents didn't know was sometimes enough to win with strategy because people's execution was too weak. Taurens and Walkers. Hell, I even made Taurens work in 2020 against human players. I beat Blade and Hawk with it, 2-0, 2-0, right? Players that were high active pro players, and I was just a washed up streamer. Still won with Taurens, pretty cool, right? But technically, they never work unless by surprise they get figured out. There's a couple of ways to counter Taurens and Walkers. You can explode their body with Siege or certain spells, orb effects like Black Arrow or Incinerate, and then there's no corpse to revive. So that takes care of that. Taurens and Doctors are combining two units that completely get countered by Dryads, Chimera, Frostworm, Destroyer. So you're just combining units. Heal Ward is amazing on Taurens, but they get countered by the exact same thing, right? So that's the problem with that. Bloodlust and Taurens, amazing, so much damage, but get countered by the same thing, which is Destroyers, right? So that is the main problem with them. The theoretical best use application for Taurens is when you combine them with Berzerkers. Now you have a DPS at range that can kill air, and you've got a tank. But Taurens do not have the property of a tank. Essentially, the design of Tauren is tier 3 heavy melee damage dealer. Right? He's not a tank, he's not built like one, he's a damage dealer. He's tanky, but the main purpose is damage. So what is he? 5 population, 1300 health, 280 gold, takes 39 seconds to build in the current version of the game. The totem can now be made at tier 2, which means you'll have it ready by the time you get to tier 3. They need Pulverize upgrade, which allows them to do 60 splash damage in a small radius and a drop-off splash damage in a bigger radius. They have a baseline Pulverize now, a mini Pulverize that deals 20 damage, which is a bit. This damage is unaffected by their attack or armor upgrades. So the best thing you can do for Taurens is give them attack speed, which is Bloodlust and TC Endurance Aura. Then they'll get more Pulverize procs. This wreaks havoc on melee units that surround them, and it wreaks havoc on enemy ranged units. But it gets countered by splitting. If you put a Mountain King in front of 3 Taurens, then the Pulverize will not have any value. The Rifleman will be shooting the Taurens. Although Taurens thematically should destroy rifles, the slow and the Mountain King in front forces your Taurens to move past the Mountain King to ignore him, but they're slowed and they're thunderclapped, so they can't catch up. And then they really can't usually do the damage that they're supposed to do. And they're 5 population, so they give like 105 experience when they die, which is a lot. They can get possessed, they get countered by all kinds of things. So yeah, Taurens sadly don't see a lot of use, but I have been, and other people have been, coming up with some ways where maybe with some patch changes, Taurens might finally become viable, because they pretty much have not been used at high level competitive play since 2004, and that's a shame. They're the only Orc tier 3 unit, but they have too much overlap and counterability by grunts. Some ideas are floating around, like give them like a bull charge so that they can close the gap. I personally thought they could be given maybe slow resistance, where if they get slowed by 50%, they only get slowed by 30% instead, 20% slow resistance. And then they could be a little faster. They get kited a bit too much, and that's why we don't see them a lot. But if you were to do a hypothetical situation, you've got your ideal 80-foot army, but you don't know what I'm going to make. I've got my ideal 80-foot army, but I don't know what you're going to make. I'd probably include Taurens rather than Grunts. That situation just never happens in a one-on-one. Okay, that is the Orcish tier list. We started on a high with the Grunts, the Berzerkers and the Raiders. We ended lower. These units are very cool, but we don't see a lot of play with them. Nonetheless, people keep trying to innovate and keep trying to make it work. They may not be very good now, but perhaps someday it will be found out how you can use them, or perhaps it will require a patch. The Orcish army has many support units. I classify the Kodo, Shaman, Walker, Doctor, Bat as support units. Demolishers support killing buildings, especially guard tower rushes. And Windriders and Taurens only support your opponent's experience amount, aka they level up the enemy heroes while doing almost nothing. The true staple units are Raiders, Berzerkers, Grunts and Shamans, Headhunters, Kodo and Peons. And overall I think the Orc race design is very cool, and many of their units, including some of their less strong units, have made me a massive fan, which is why I've chosen to main them for more than half of my life by now. And I hope to continue to do so for many more years. Thanks for watching my big rant about Orc and the Orc unit tier list. Hope you enjoy playing Warcraft 3 if this inspired you to play. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to hit the subscribe on this channel and let me know what other kinds of videos you would like to see. Don't worry though, if you don't have any ideas, I've got many, so if you like the content, make sure to hit sub and you'll see more. In the future, I'll be doing things like Warcraft item tier list and so many more. Thanks for watching. See ya, have a nice day.